Good morning, everybody. We've got another chapter to read in Princess and the Goblin today, chapter 6, where we are going to meet a miner's son, which is the title of this chapter. So if you recall, the last time we read, we heard that Ludi did not believe Irene's story. And do you remember what happened when Irene tried to find her great-grandmother again? Great-great-grandmother. She could not find her. She went back in the way she thought she went before, but she ended up in the kitchen going downstairs again. She could not find her way back. So today we're going to be reading once again about this little miner. That's the name of the chapter, not miner's son, never mind. But and we need to refer back to, I think it was in chapter 1, hearing about why Irene does not go out at nighttime. Do you remember? Because of the goblins, that's right. So the goblins come out of their cavern at night, and they have a grudge against the king and all of the king's family members, which includes the princess. She's a descendant of this royal family that they have been mad at for generations. So chapter 6, let's begin reading. If you've got a copy of your book, please follow along, and I will also present my screen. A Little Miner is what we're reading now. Okay, there's quite a bit of verse, some songs in this one, and so I do not want to go to that other type of, the way that I presented my screen for Black Beauty, so I'll just keep it on this again. But every so often, I'll point out where we are so that you can hopefully follow along fairly well. Now, The Little Miner. The next day, the great clouds still hung over the mountain, and the rain poured like water from a full sponge. The princess was very fond of being out of doors, and she nearly cried when she saw that the weather was no better. But the mist was not of such a dark, dingy gray. There was light in it, and as the hours went on, it grew brighter and brighter until it was almost too brilliant to look at. And late in the afternoon, the sun broke out so gloriously that Irene clapped her hands, crying, see, Ludi! The sun has had his face washed. Look how bright he is. Do get my hat and let us go out for a walk. Oh dear, how happy I am. The sun has had his face washed. That's really cute. Now Ludi was very glad to please the princess. She got her hat and cloak, and they set up together for a walk up the mountain, for the road was so hard and steep that the water could not rest upon it. And it was always dry enough for walking a few minutes after the rain ceased. The clouds were rolling away in broken pieces, like great over-woolly sheep, whose wool the sun had bleached till it was almost too white for the eyes to bear. Between them, the sky shone with a deeper and purer blue because of the rain. This is where we're at now. Now the trees on the roadside were hung all over with drops, which sparkled in the sun like jewels. The only thing that were no brighter for the rain were the brooks that ran down the mountain. They had changed from the clearness of crystal to a muddy brown, but what they lost in color, they gained in sound, or at least in noise, for a brook when it is swollen is not so musical as before. But Irene was in raptures. She was exceedingly happy, with the great brown streams tumbling down everywhere. So they may be muddy and not very nice to look at. However, she is so happy at all of this beauty around her outside. And Ludi shared in her delight, for she had too been confined in the house for 3 days. At length she observed that the sun was getting low, and said it was time to be getting back. She made the remark again and again, but every time the princess begged her to go on just a little bit farther, and a little farther, reminding her that it was much easier to go downhill, and saying that when they did turn, they would be at home in a moment. So on and on they did go, now to look at a group of ferns over whose tops a stream was pouring in a watery arch, now to pick a shining stone from the rock by the wayside, now to watch the flight of some bird. Suddenly, the shadow of a great mountain peak came up from behind and shot in front of them. The shadow is moving, which means the sun is moving in relation to them. So, what does that tell you? It's getting later in the day. When the nurse saw it, she started and shook. Catching hold of the princess's hand, she turned and began to run down the hill. "What's all the haste, Nursey?" asked Irene, running alongside of her. Meaning, why are you so hurried? "We must not be out a moment longer," Nursey says. "But we can't help being out a good many moments longer." Meaning, they're that far away from the castle, it's going to be a while before they get back. It was too true. The nurse almost cried. They were much too far from home. It was against express orders to be out with the princess 1 moment after the sun was down. And they were nearly a mile up the mountain. If His Majesty, Irene's papa, were to hear of it, Ludi would certainly be dismissed. Dismissed here means fired. That is one of the most clear orders she has been given, to not let the princess out at nighttime. Could mean the end of her life. These goblins might try to kill her. So she might be fired for this. And to leave the princess would break her heart. It was no wonder she ran, but Irene was not in the least frightened, not knowing anything to be frightened at. She kept on chattering as well as she could, but it was not easy. "Ludi, Ludi, why do you run so fast? It shakes my teeth when I talk." "Then don't talk," said Ludi. But the princess went on talking. She was always saying, "Look, look, Ludi." But Ludi paid no more heed to anything she said, only ran on. "Look, look, Ludi, don't you see that funny man peeping over the rock?" Could be a goblin. Ludi only ran faster. They had to pass the rock, and when they came nearer, the princess saw it was only a lump of the rock itself that she had taken for a man. That was a close one. "Look, look, Ludi, there's such a curious creature at the foot of that old tree. Look at it, Ludi, it's making faces at us, I do think." Remember that Irene doesn't even know what these goblins are. Now Ludi gave a stifled cry and she ran faster still, so fast that Irene's little legs could not keep up with her, and she fell with a crash. It was a hard downhill road and she had been running very fast, so it was no wonder she began to cry. This put the nurse nearly beside herself, but all she could do was to run on, the moment she got the princess on her feet again. "Who's that laughing at me?" said the princess, trying to keep in her sobs and running too fast for her grazed knees. "Nobody, child," said the nurse almost angrily. But that instant there came a burst of coarse tittering, some sort of sound like whispering in the background, from somewhere near. The hoarse, indistinct voice that seemed to say, "Lies, lies, lies!" And the horse would be kind of gravelly, like, "Lies, lies, lies!" How strange. "Oh," cried the nurse with a sigh that was almost a scream, and she ran on faster than ever. "Nursey, Ludi, I can't run anymore. Do let us walk a bit." She caught her up but found her much too heavy to run with, and had to set her down again. Then she looked wildly about, gave a great cry, and said, "We've taken the wrong turning somewhere, and I don't know where we are. We're lost, lost." It's already almost dark. They need to get back quickly. The terror she was in had quite bewildered her. It was true enough they had lost their way. They'd been running down into a little valley in which there was no house to be seen. Now Irene did not know what good reason there was for her nurse's terror, for the servants had all strict orders never to mention the goblins to her. But it was very discomposing to see her nurse in such a fright. So she doesn't need to be afraid, but she's seeing her nurse afraid, and that's making her frightened. Before, however, she had time to grow thoroughly alarmed like her, she heard the sound of whistling, and that revived her. Presently, she saw a little boy coming up the road from the valley to meet them. He was the whistler. But before they met, his whistling changed to singing, and this is something like what he sang. "Ring, dod, bang, go the hammers clang, hit and turn and bore, whiz and puff and roar. Thus we rive the rocks, force the goblin locks, see the shining ore, 1, 2, 3, bright as gold can be, 4, 5, 6, shovels, mattocks, picks, 7, 8, 9, light your lamp at mine, 10, 11, 12, loosely hold the helve. We're the merry miner boys, make the goblins hold their noise. Interesting little song. Now, miners are people who work underground in caves, like getting coal or ore. So let's see what that has to do with our story. I wish you would hold your noise, said the nurse rudely to the boy. For the very word goblin at such a time and in such a place made her tremble. It would bring the goblins upon them to a certainty, she thought, to defy them in that way. So she thinks the goblins are going to come for them because he's making fun of the goblins in that song. But whether the boy heard her or not, he did not stop his singing. 13, 14, 15, this is worth the sifting. 16, 17, 18, there's the match in Layton. 19, 20, goblins in a plenty. Do be quiet, cried the nurse in a whispered shriek. But the boy, who was now close at hand, still went on. Can you join me? Hush, scush, scurry. There you go in a hurry. Gobble, gobble, goblin. There you go a-wobblin. Hobble, hobble, hobblin. Cobble, cobble, cobblin. Hob, bob, goblin. Huh. Oh, that is quite a song. There, said the boy, as he stood still opposite them. There, that'll do for them. They can't bear singing, and they can't stand that song. They can't sing themselves, for they have no more voice than a crow, and they don't like other people to sing. So why do the goblins hate singing? Because they're not good singers. So it makes them mad to hear songs. Now, the boy was dressed in a miner's dress, not an actual dress, but like an outfit, with a curious cap on his head. He was a very nice-looking boy, with eyes as dark as the mines in which he worked, and as sparkling as the crystals in their rocks. He was about 12 years old. Remember, Irene's about 8. His face was almost too pale for beauty, which came of his being so little in the open air and the sunlight, for even vegetables grown in the dark are white. But he looked happy, merry indeed, perhaps at the thought of having routed the goblins, and his bearing as he stood before them had nothing clownish or rude about it. So he has really saved them by singing this song. I saw them, he went on, as I came up, and I'm very glad I did. I knew they were after somebody, but I couldn't see who it was. They won't touch you as long as I'm with you. And that's because he knows these songs that scare off the goblins. Why, who are you? Asked the nurse, offended at the freedom with which he spoke to them. I'm Peter's son. Well, who's Peter? Peter the miner. I don't know him, Moody says. But I'm his son, though, Peter's son says. And why should the goblins mind you, pray? Like, please? Because I don't mind them. I'm used to them. Well, this boy knows the goblins somehow, and he is unaffected by them, which actually is going to help Ludi and Irene. She says, what difference does that make? Well, if you're not afraid of them, they're afraid of you. I'm not afraid of them. That's all. But it's all that's wanted. Up here, that is. I'm going to zoom out. It's a different thing down there. They won't always mind that song even down there. And if anyone sings it, they stand grinning at him awfully. And if he gets frightened and misses a word or says a wrong one, they give it him. What did they do to him? Asked Irene with a trembling voice. Don't go frightening the princess, said the nurse. The princess? Repeated the little miner, taking off his curious cap. I beg your pardon, but you oughtn't to be out so late. Everybody knows that's against the law. Yes, indeed it is, said the nurse, beginning to cry again, and I shall have to suffer for it. Oh, she is probably worried about the princess, but mainly she's worried about herself, that she's going to get fired. And she should have been keeping an eye on the time and protecting the princess. What does that matter? Said the boy. It must be your fault. It is the princess who will suffer for it. I hope they didn't hear you call her the princess. If they did, they're sure to know her again. They're awfully sharp. Ludi, Ludi, cried the princess. Take me home. Don't go on like that, said the nurse to the boy, almost fiercely. How could I help it? I've lost my way. So she's just focused on herself and wanting to make excuses for herself, Ludi is. You shouldn't have been out so late, he says. You wouldn't have lost your way if you hadn't been frightened, said the boy. Come along, I'll soon set you right again. Shall I carry your little highness? Meaning the little princess. Impertinence, murmured the nurse, meaning rudeness. But she did not actually say it out loud, for she thought if she made him angry, he might take his revenge by telling someone belonging to the house, and then it would be sure to come to the king's ears. No, thank you, said Irene. I can walk very well, though I can't run so fast as Nursey. If you will give me one hand, Ludi will give me another, and then I shall get on famously. Meaning very well. They soon had her between them, holding a hand of each. Now let's run, said the nurse. No, said the little miner. That's the worst thing you can do. If you hadn't run before, you would not have lost your way. And if you run now, they will be after you in a moment. I don't want to run, said Irene. But you don't think of me, said the nurse. The nurse, Nurse Ludi, is only concerned about herself, trying to keep her job and not think about what truly is best for Irene. And it seems like this little boy, he knows the best way to protect against goblins. Yes, I do think of you, Ludi, Irene says. This is where we are. The boy says they won't touch us if we don't run. Yes, but if they know at the house that I've kept you out so late, I shall be turned away, and that would break my heart. Turned away, Ludi? Who would turn you away? Your papa, child. But I'll tell him it was all my fault. And you know it was, Ludi. He won't mind that, I'm sure he won't. Then I'll cry and go down on my knees to him and beg him not to take away my own dear Ludi. The nurse was comforted at hearing this and said no more. They went on, walking pretty fast, but taking care not to run a step. I want to talk to you, said Irene to the little miner, but it's so awkward, I don't even know your name. My name's Curdy, little princess. What a funny name. Curdy. What more? Meaning, what's your last name? Curdy Peterson. What's your name, please? Irene. What more? I don't know what more. What more is my name, Ludi? She doesn't know her last name. Well, princesses haven't got more than one name, she says. They don't want it. Oh, then, Curdy, you must call me just Irene and no more. No, indeed, said the nurse indignantly. He shall do no such thing. Ludi thinks that it's like poor manners for someone of his low status, since he's just a poor miner's boy, to call her by her first name. What shall he call me then, Ludi? Your Royal Highness. My Royal Highness? What's that? No, Ludi, I won't be called names. I don't like them. You told me once yourself, it's only rude children. Just a minute, let me zoom out again. That call names. And I'm sure Curdy wouldn't be rude. Curdy, my name's Irene. Well, Irene, said Curdy with a glance at the nurse, which showed he enjoyed teasing her. He's looking over at her. It is very kind of you to let me call you anything. I like your name very much. So he's doing it just to tease her. Well, Irene. He expected the nurse to interfere again, meaning to get in the way. But he soon saw that she was too frightened to speak. She was staring at something a few yards before them, middle of the path, where it narrowed between rocks so that only one could pass at a time. It is very much kinder of you to go out of your way to take us home, said Irene. I'm not going out of my way yet, said Curdy. It's on the other side of those rocks. The path turns off to my father's. You wouldn't think of leaving us till we're safe home, I'm sure, gasped the nurse. So she is afraid. She wants help. Of course not, said Curdy. Oh dear, good, kind Curdy. I'll give you a kiss when we get home. I bet some of you cracked up at that. So the princess is promising that she will give him a kiss when they get home. The nurse gave a great pull by the hand she held, but at that instant, the something in the middle of the way, which had looked like a great lump of earth brought down by the rain, began to move. One after another, it shot out 4 long things like 2 arms and 2 legs, but it was now too dark to tell what they were. The nurse began to tremble from head to foot. Irene clasped Curdy's hand yet faster, and Curdy began to sing again. 1, 2, hit and hew. 3, 4, blast and bore. 5, 6, there's a fix. 7, 8, hold it straight. 9, 10, hit again. Hurry, scurry, bother, smother. There's a toad in the road. Smash it, squash it, fry it, dry it. You're another, up and off. There's another. Huh. Another silly song. As he uttered the last words, Curdy let go of his companion and rushed at the thing in the road as if he would trample it under his feet. He was hurrying forward to stomp on that goblin. It gave a great spring and ran straight up one of the rocks like a huge spider. Curdy turned back laughing and took Irene's hand again. She grasped his very tight, but said nothing till they had passed the rocks. A few yards more, and she found herself on a part of the road she knew and was able to speak again. You know, Curdy, I don't quite like your song. It sounds to me rather rude, she said. Well, perhaps it is, answered Curdy. I never thought of that. It's a way we have. We do it because they don't like it. Who don't like it? The Cobbs, as we call them. Don't, said the nurse. Why not? Said Curdy. I beg you won't. Please don't. Oh, if you ask me that way, of course I won't, though I don't know a bit know why. Look, there are the lights of your great house down below. You'll be at home in 5 minutes now. Almost safe and sound because of Curdy's help. Now, nothing more happened. They reached home in safety. Nobody had missed them or even known they had gone out, and they arrived at the door belonging to their part of the house without anyone seeing them. The nurse was rushing in with a hurried and not over-gracious good night to Curdy, but the princess pulled her hand from hers and was just throwing her arms round Curdy's neck when she caught her again and dragged her away. Ludi, Ludi, I promised to kiss, cried Irene. A princess mustn't give kisses. It's not at all proper, said Ludi. But I promised, said the princess. There's no occasion. He's only a miner's boy. He's a good boy and a brave boy, and he's been very kind to us. Ludi, Ludi, I promised. Then you shouldn't have promised, she said. But Ludi, I promised a kiss. Your Royal Highness, said Ludi, suddenly grown very respectful, must come in directly. Nurse, a princess must not break her word, said Irene, drawing herself up and standing stock still. Ludi did not know which the king might count the worst, to let the princess to be out after sunset or to let her kiss a miner's boy. She did not know that being a gentleman, as many kings have been, he would have counted neither of them the worse. So the narrator is saying, it wouldn't have been bad in the king's eyes for the princess to be out late necessarily, since she was safe with Curdy. And it wouldn't have been bad to keep her promise to kiss Curdy. However much he might have disliked his daughter to kiss the miner's boy, he would not have had her break her word for all the goblins in creation. But as I say, the nurse was not lady enough to understand this. And so she was in a great difficulty, for if she insisted, someone might hear the princess cry and run to see, and then all would come out. But here, Curdy came again to the rescue. Never mind, Princess Irene, he said. You mustn't kiss me tonight, but you shan't break your word. I will come another time. You may be sure that I will. He's coming back for that kiss. Oh, thank you, Curdy, said the princess, and she stopped crying. It really bothered her that she might have to break a promise. "Good night, Irene. Good night, Ludi," said Curdie, and he turned and was out of sight in a moment. "I should like to see him." I should like to see him," muttered the nurse, meaning she doesn't really think he should come back. It's like, "I should like to see you come back," as she carried the princess to the nursery. "You will see him," said Irene, quite earnestly. "You may be sure Curdie will keep his word. He's sure to come again." Just like Irene is a true princess, Curdie is really like a prince on the inside. He is a man of his word. He will do what he promises to do. "I should like to see him," repeated the nurse, and said no more. She did not want to open a new cause of strife with the princess by saying more plainly what she meant. Glad enough that she had succeeded both in getting home unseen and in keeping the princess from kissing the miner's boy, she resolved to watch her far better in the future. Her carelessness has already doubled the danger she was in. Formerly, the goblins were her only fear. Now she had to protect her charge, Irene, from Curdie as well. So 2 people that she needs to protect the princess from. Okay. Chapter 7 you'll be reading tomorrow is about the mines. So a lot happened in this chapter. What do you think of little Curdie? He seems very clever. He knows about the songs to scare off the goblins. He knows not to run. He is very mature, more so than Ludi, you might say. So we'll hear more of him. He promises to come back for his kiss. Think he will? And we'll see what life is like in the mines, that is in the caves, the caverns, where these people are digging for coal or ore. So we're going to see that in our chapter tomorrow. I hope you're enjoying the story very much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.